Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Friday. I hope you're having a good day wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. Thank you as always for joining me. Halloween today, of course. If you're like me and going to be dragged around the houses later on by your children doing trick or treating, then have fun. And I hope it goes well. It is the day before Arsenal's Premier League meeting at Burnley. Mikel Arteta has been speaking a little bit earlier today at his press conference. I thought I'd pop on here afterwards and go over some of the big talking points from what he had to say. We'll look ahead to that Burnley game, of course, look at maybe what sort of decisions Mikel does have facing him due to the injury issues that he's got at the moment that he's going to have to juggle. We're going to look at what some of you guys have been saying ahead of the game as well. So there's lots for us to get stuck into. We'll start with these sort of immediate injury updates from Mikel at his press conference in terms of the players who, I don't know, not the long-term absentees, basically the players who've got sort of fresh injury concerns, obviously fairly recent for Gabriel Martinelli and William Saliba. Both had missed the Carabao Cup game in midweek against Brighton, and both are going to miss this game as well tomorrow. So Mikel said, I think we have the same ones who are out. Martinelli's still out. Saliba, we have to wait and see. So he didn't totally rule out Saliba, but it feels unlikely to me. He says we have another session this afternoon. The rest are getting closer. I think they're in the right direction, but not available yet. We're sort of pressed further on Gabriel Martinelli. Again, very reluctant to put any sort of time frame yet on Gabriel Martinelli. He just says we don't know yet, but I think this game is going to come too early for him. So Martinelli's certainly not going to be playing. Again, he didn't totally rule out William Saliba, but I'd be very, very surprised if Saliba's available for this game. More importantly, well, not more importantly, but sort of more encouragingly, shall we say, on Odegaard, Jesus, Madueke, Havertz. And I would say this more leans towards Madueke, Havertz and Odegaard. There was a positive update from Mikel. Obviously, tomorrow is going to come too soon for them. But he said, when he was asked about them, he said, I would say, look, it's weeks and some of them pretty soon. Hopefully, if they keep evolving the way they are doing, it's difficult to put a game on it. We have the November international break coming up, which is after the Sunderland game next weekend. And that's a 2-week break. After that, we will have some back. I don't know if it will be all of them or some of them, but by then, they will be quite close. Simon at the Standard then asked him, look, the game after the international break, of course, is the North London derby against Tottenham. Are they going to be available for that? Mikel said, yes, I'm very excited. They are tremendous players. I see them working every day, how desperate they are to be part of the team, the huge boost that it's going to be for the squad to have these players available again after such a long time. I'm really happy that I think it's going to be very soon. And it is going to be massive to have these players back. We'll wait and see if it is the North London derby. Fingers crossed it will be. That will fit the time frame, obviously, that we're expecting for a lot of these players. We haven't seen Kai Havertz back on the grass yet. We haven't seen Martin Odegaard back on the grass yet. Even Noni Madueke. We know they're doing a lot of work in the gym. We know they are getting close. You would think during that 2-week international break when a lot of players are absent as well because they're away, that those players are going to really be able to step things up and hopefully be back on the grass. And what we 3 weeks now away from the North London derby, if we can have those players back, can you imagine, as Mikel said, the boost that's going to be not just to us to see these players back, but to the teammates. Imagine being out on the training pitches and after all this time seeing Kai Havertz walking back out there, seeing Martin Odegaard walking back out there, seeing Noni Madueke walking back out there. When you're already in a really strong position in the league and you're already doing well, you're already winning games, and suddenly you add this lot into the mix, and that's before you even consider Gabriel Jesus as well. It's going to be a massive lift to absolutely everyone. And be huge, absolutely huge. So fingers crossed, as Mikel says, they are going to be back very, very soon. Okay, we'll run through a few other things that he had to say in the press conference. Obviously, we've got the embargoed section coming a little bit later on today, but otherwise in the live section that we've just heard from him, he talked about the fixtures a lot. Obviously, we've got a bit of confusion at the moment about exactly when Arsenal are going to be playing their quarterfinal against Crystal Palace in the League Cup because there just isn't a space in the calendar for it. It looks like it might have to be the week that it is originally scheduled, but that would mean that Palace would have to play Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then again at the weekend. And obviously that's not ideal, and Crystal Palace will be trying to do everything they can not to have to do that, but it is just virtually impossible to find any space in the calendar for it. It's just another example that we see crop up of how difficult it is with the fixtures, and there's just so many of them. So he was asked a lot about that, and he said, look, the main thing we have to consider in all of this, and the authorities have to consider, because it's not really the clubs. The clubs can kind of try and have a say, but ultimately it's down to the broadcasters, it's down to the Premier League, everyone like that, and the police. He said the main thing we have to consider is two things. That has to be the principle. The main principle is two things we have to consider: player welfare and then supporters. And he said as long as those main two things are at the front of everything that we do and every conversation that we had, then he thinks everything can be worked out. And that just has to be the key thing for them. Those two priorities have to be front and center of every conversation they had. It has to be the two principles everyone worked towards. And he was asked about player strike and all that thing, the Rodri comments from last year. And again, he said, look, as long as we stick to these two things and we make sure that is the focus, and that those are the sort of two pillars that we do everything around, that hopefully we can avoid anything like that, because he said it'd be awful, player strike. You know, Premier League's best thing in the world. You would not want something like that happening. So that he talked about that. He talked a lot. Tom Canton was asking him about Miles Skelly called the Emirates our house in midweek after the win. And Tom was like, well, you know, is that a sort of language that comes from you, or is that something the players have just decided? And he said, look, it's the sort of language that I use because it is our house. And he said, that's how we've got to view things when it's at the Emirates. It's our house, it's our territory, it's ours to protect. That's the sort of language he wants to use. And he said that players and supporters as well, that's what they should be doing. You know, everything we can do to protect the Emirates. It's our home, make it as hostile as it is for anyone else who comes close to it. And he says that's what we've got to always do when it comes to the Emirates. I thought it was interesting. He said, see, this weekend we're away. It's different. It's sort of slightly different mindset. It's a different language to use, but we use a different language when we go away. But at home, it has to be, this is ours. No one's coming here to take what is ours. And I thought that was just a nice little indication, again, of the sort of mindset that Mikel Arteta has and the competitive spirit that he has. And he talked about training as well, which I thought was really interesting. Gave one really good example of this and how training has to be super competitive. You know, Miles spoke in midweek after the Brighton win about how he loves that competitive nature at Arsenal, how tough it is, how much every single player wants to play all the time. And Mikel pointed to training and said, look, that's, if you don't have it in training, if you're not that competitive animal in training, then you're not going to be as good on the pitch. So it's very, very hard to suddenly go from training at 50%, 70%, and then going full throttle at the weekend on the pitch. Is very hard. You've got to go 100% in training to be able to do it on the pitch as well. And he pointed to Kepa as that. And he used a good example. He said he made those saves in midweek early on in that game because, and the exact quote was, every day he trains like an absolute beast. And that's no coincidence. So it was a really good example, I thought, of as long as the players, even if they're not playing that often, like Kepa, who's struggling for minutes, struggling for game times, as long as they're every single day they're on the training pitch, doing everything they can to try and get themselves into the team and working as hard as they possibly can and training at 100%, then when they do get their opportunity, they're going to be in a much better position to take it on the pitch. And Kepa did that in midweek. Obviously, look, Kepa's not going to play this weekend unless there's an injury to David Raya, of course. But he made sure that when he did get his opportunity, he was in the right place. And that's the sort of thing that Arsenal need. You know, tiny little percentages are going to be the difference between winning and not winning something this season. And if you can take advantage of those tiny little percentages and make sure that every single player is absolutely ready to go, then you're going to be in a much better position to hopefully achieve what you want to achieve. There's other bits and pieces who asked, you know, when does the title race start? And he said first day of pre-season. You know, it's not about the run-in or anything like that. For him, it's the first day of pre-season. He says, you want to win it. If you want to win it, you've got to prepare for it. It's the first day of pre-season. That's when the title race starts for him. And he said, now they've just got to focus on everything they've done, all the preparation they're doing, keep doing what they're doing, just focus. But for him, it's not about May. It's not about the turn of the year. It's about the first day of pre-season. That's when the title race starts. So that was the main sort of talking points from Mikel Arteta's press conference. Obviously, as I said, we do have the embargo section coming a little bit later on today. So turning our attentions to the game against Burnley tomorrow at Turf Moor. I'm going to be heading up for that early doors tomorrow. It's going to be a tricky game. Look, the promoted sides have started very, very well. Mikel did speak about that in the press conference today. You know, the last few years, sides who have come up to the Championship have ended up being pushovers. Really, they've not been good enough, and I think the league's quality has been affected because of that. But this season, you can't point your fingers at the promoted clubs because they've all started well. Burnley, Sunderland. I mean, look at where Sunderland are in the league, doing fantastically well. Burnley doing really, really well as well. And they're scoring goals, Burnley. So it's going to be a difficult game for Arsenal, no doubt about that. Mikel Arteta is expecting a difficult game. Arsenal on this fantastic run of form. confidence is high, not conceding goals. They've won 8 in a row now, I think, in all competitions. So they went through the whole of October, winning all 6 of their games without conceding a goal. First time ever to do that in English top flight history. So they're full of confidence, but you cannot take your eye off the ball. You know, these 2 next games for me, so important. If you can get into the international break with 6 more points under your belts and have had such a perfect run between the 2 international breaks where your other rivals have been slipping up. And remember, the next couple of games, the next couple of weeks, you've got, you know, it's Aston Villa, Liverpool, I think tomorrow, or Liverpool, Aston Villa. You've got Liverpool, Manchester City coming up. Tottenham are playing Chelsea. You know, all these teams are playing against each other. Someone's going to be dropping points here. So again, with Arsenal, although they're tricky, Burnley and Sunderland, you want them to be getting 6 points from those games. And if they can do that and get into the national break, they're going to be in such a strong position and good position. So it's really, really important. You look at what Mikel's going to do for this game. Obviously made lots of changes, 10 changes. Eze was the only player who started both games. I suspect Eze will still start this tomorrow. There is, you know, Ethan had a good game. He had a good second half in midweek. You could potentially play Ethan there, play Trossard on the left and give Eze a little bit of a rest. I don't think he will do that. I think he's more likely to give Eze a rest in midweek in the Champions League in Prague and play Ethan in that game. I think the fullbacks are certainly going to change. You know, we had Ben White and we had Mars Skelly starting against Brighton. You know, fully expecting Timber and Calafiori to come back in for that game. If there's no William Saliba, it will just be Christian Mosquera. Has been so solid since he's come in. You think he'll slot in next to Gabriel. So you imagine the back 4 is going to be Timber, Mosquera, Gabriel, and Ricardo Calafiori, Zubimendi, Declan Rice. I think Eze will play in that sort of number 10 role. Then you've got Saka, Trossard will be on the left, and then Victor Gyökeres up front. So I don't think there's going to be too many surprises from that team. You know, I will do my predicted 11 tomorrow if I get time before I leave for Burnley, because I'm going to be leaving early doors. So I'm not entirely sure I'm going to be able to get a show out in the morning before I do that. But I will go over the predicted 11. Let me know your thoughts in case I am able to record that show. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below in terms of what you think Mikel Arteta should do. Do you think it'll be that 11 that I've just said, or do you think he should maybe tweak things? Does Ethan Nwaneri, for example, should he stay in the team after scoring in midweek? Let me know your thoughts on that, but I'd be surprised. I think that's the 11 we're probably going to see tomorrow. Scott Parker's been talking about Arsenal in the build-up to the game as well. Very complimentary, as you would imagine. You know, batted off all the questions. They were almost trying to make him say, "Oh, set piece FC," all that sort of stuff, and Arsenal were damaging the product to the Premier League, all the rubbish narrative that we're hearing time and time again. He batted all of that off. As I said, he was very complimentary about Arsenal when he said, look, they're far more than just a team about set pieces. They've got far more facets to the game than that. Mikel's, you know, done an amazing job. Said, I think he called him a well-oiled machine, which I feel like Arsenal are now. You know, I really do think there are comparisons to this team that we're seeing now to Mourinho's 2005 sort of era Chelsea team in terms of defensive quality and how difficult they are to beat, especially if they score first. And yeah, Scott Parker seemed to agree with that. So I thought he was very complimentary on that. I'm just going to go a few of your questions and comments before we wrap this one up for today. There was lots of reaction to me talking about the cup draw. I said, Crystal Palace, I think, is a really tough draw. That, especially doubly sort of adding to that all the big boys avoided each other in the other ties, so no one's going to knock each other out in the quarterfinals. And barring any sort of big upsets, it's going to be, you know, definitely you'd imagine Man City, Chelsea, Newcastle in the semi-finals. Max says, Charles, I think you're being too negative about the quarterfinal draw. There's no seeding, right? You're correct. Am I correct? It was possible we could have drawn Man City or Newcastle. Yes, absolutely. Surely either of those would have been worse draws, requiring a more physical game at a very tough time in the year where games are coming thick and fast. Playing at home in that congested part of the season is massive. Yes, it is. But I also think, you know, the likelihood is now if Arsenal get through, they're going to have to play 2 games against one of those teams because the semi-finals are 2-legged teams, so a 2-legged game. I'd probably rather play one of these teams now in a 1-legged game than the semi-final in January, mid-January, over 2 legs. I mean, those 2 games crippled Arsenal's squad last season. They are in a strong position this year, squad-wise, so hopefully they'll be able to get through it. Dwayne says, disagree, Charles. This is a great draw. The competition has served its purpose for us now. The kids and backups can get very high-quality minutes against a great team in Palace. It'll be great experience for them with low stakes. Losing just reduces fixture congestion and eliminates the temptation to risk bigger players in the semi-finals or the final of a pretty unimportant trophy, in my opinion. In any case, it should be similar strength lineup in this competition for our duration in it this season. Much bigger fish to fry. And Guna 184 says it's a great draw for Arsenal due to fixture congestion for Palace they'll have to heavily rotate. Yeah, we'll see what the final decision is going to be in terms of where that Crystal Palace game is. Will it be in that week starting the 15th or 16th of December? That's looking the most likely option for now. It's very, very tough to see where else it could be. Christmas Eve has even been sort of mooted as a possible suggestion, but I'd be very surprised if that was the case. Mikel did speak about that in his press conference, sort of laughed that off today, said not Christmas Eve. So we'll wait and see, but it's certainly looking like that week, the 15th and 16th, is looking the most likely option for now, which isn't ideal for Palace, but you would imagine they will be in a position where that Thursday night game in the Conference League should be a bit of a dead rubber by then. I think it's their last league game. They should have already secured comfortably qualification by then. So if they're going to rest anyone, it will be, if they're going to rest any players, it should be in that Thursday game against, I can't remember who it is, a Finnish team, KUPS, I think it is, rather than the quarterfinal against Arsenal. We've got one from Nate here. He says, curious about academy team tactics. Do they play with a similar setup to the senior squad? So if they get called up by Arteta, they can hit the ground running. Is it more down to the individual manager or a bit of a hybrid? It is a bit of a hybrid, but the overall aim is for everyone to kind of play in a similar way to the first team, because that does make integration a little bit easier. You know, Arsene Wenger was very, very hot on that. It has stayed fairly similar since that time, but you know, the manager is the manager at the end of the day, and if he feels a different formation, a different setup is going to be a better way to go for certain games, then yes, he will do that. But overall, the aim is for the teams in the youth setups, in the younger setups, to play in a similar style to the way that the first team set up. So yeah, that's the answer to that. Nate, thank you very much. I think we've got one more now. It was from Toby, I think it is. Says a drop off from Zubimendi to Norgard is just too much. We need a better backup next summer, ideally some wonder kid for that position that can grow and learn from Zubi. And right, I wouldn't disagree. I have to say, I mean, the one thing I would say is I don't think it's so much the drop off from Zubimendi to Norgard, because I don't think Norgard is Zubimendi's first replacement. If anything happens to Zubimendi, I think Declan Rice, we've seen already this season, he's the guy who will drop in and play the Zubimendi role, and then someone else will fill in. You know, Marino will play left day, or Havertz when he's back will play left day, or you'll have Eze and Odegaard when they're fit playing together in those positions. So I don't think it's necessarily you have to look at it as Zubimendi to Norgard. I think it's probably more Zubimendi, Rice, Norgard, if you see what I mean. But I wouldn't disagree on, you know, next summer, I would say if you can get a type of profile similar to Mascara for a midfielder as well, that's the way I probably would have gone this summer as well. They didn't. They went with the Norgard route. I can understand why, especially when they had so much other work to do. But for me, I think next summer, probably another younger, up-and-coming dynamic midfielder would probably be the way that I would go. So, yeah, I agree with you on that, Toby. And that is it from me this morning. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Appreciate your time, as always. Thank you for listening as well. Of course, if you're doing it via podcast, I will be back tomorrow. I'm not sure yet if it's going to be in the morning or if it'll be after the game, because I am heading up to Burnley. It's a long drive, and I'm going to be leaving fairly early doors for it. So I might not get time to record a preview show in the morning, but if I don't, then I'll definitely be doing my sort of match reaction ratings video from Turf Moor. So at some point, I will be joining you tomorrow. Have a good one. Until then, and I'll speak to you later. Enjoy your weekend. Happy Halloween to everyone. Bye-bye.